A Victorian husband could literally sell his wife at a public market like livestock, and it was completely legal. This actually happened throughout the 1800s in England, and when you discover how this wife sale system worked, you'll realize it was far more twisted than anything you could imagine about marriage and divorce. You're not going to believe this actually happened, but men would drag their wives to cattle markets, put halters around their necks, and auction them off to the highest bidder. I'm talking about documented cases where women were sold for prices ranging from a few shillings to several pounds, less than what you'd pay for a decent horse. Drop a comment if you think I'm making this up, because the historical records are about to blow your mind. Here's what's fascinating about this Victorian nightmare. While divorce was practically impossible for ordinary people, requiring an expensive act of parliament that could cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, wife selling became the poor man's divorce court. The twisted logic was that since marriage was considered a property transaction, why not treat the dissolution the same way? Picture the scene at any English market town on a busy Saturday. You've got farmers selling pigs, merchants hawking vegetables, and over by the livestock pens, there's Thomas Johnson with his wife Mary, a rope around her neck, calling out prices like she's a prize heifer. The crowd gathers not in horror, but in casual interest. This was just another Saturday transaction. The audacity of this system is just staggering. We're talking about a society that prided itself on moral superiority, proper etiquette, and Christian values, yet they had legally sanctioned human trafficking, disguised as marital law. The same people who would faint at the sight of an ankle were perfectly comfortable watching wives get bartered away between strangers. You know that feeling when you see something so absurd you have to check if it's real? That's exactly what historians felt when they first discovered the extent of this practice. Court records, newspaper advertisements, and witness testimonies all confirm the same impossible truth. Wife selling wasn't some rare aberration or urban legend. This was a recognized legal procedure that happened regularly across England for over 2 centuries. Wait until you hear what happened next, because the mechanics of these sales reveal just how completely insane this whole system actually was. The ritual had to follow specific protocols to be legally binding. The husband had to lead his wife to market with a halter around her neck, usually made of rope or leather, exactly like you'd use for cattle. The halter wasn't symbolic. It was literal ownership display. You're watching a human being led through town like livestock, and everyone just accepted this as normal legal procedure. Here's where it gets absolutely ridiculous. The sale had to be public and announced with proper ceremony. Husbands would stand on market platforms shouting things like, "Here's my wife, Mary Johnson, age 28, good with children, strong back, no diseases, who'll start the bidding?" I cannot make this up. These are actual recorded phrases from witness testimonies. The prices tell you everything about how Victorian society valued women. A documented sale from 1824 shows a wife sold for 6 shillings. That's roughly $30 in today's money. For comparison, a decent pig went for about 15 shillings. A quality horse could fetch 50 pounds or more. The mathematical reality is brutal. Victorian wives were literally worth less than farm animals. But here's what really happened that'll make your head spin. Most of these sales weren't random strangers buying wives. They were elaborate theatrical performances to legitimize relationships that already existed. The buyer was usually the woman's lover, and all 3 parties, husband, wife, and purchaser, had secretly agreed to this charade beforehand. Picture this absolute madness. John Smith is tired of his wife Sarah, but divorce costs more than he'll earn in 10 years. Sarah's been having an affair with William Brown, but adultery could get her imprisoned, or worse. So they devise this incredible plan. John will sell Sarah to William at market, making their relationship legally acceptable while freeing John to remarry. Everyone gets what they want, and society pretends it's all perfectly respectable. The level of public theater required for these transactions is mind-blowing. Newspaper ads would announce upcoming wife sales like livestock auctions. The London Times regularly printed announcements like, "Wife sale. Thomas Wilson will dispose of his wife at Smithfield Market this Saturday, she being of sound body and good disposition." These weren't hidden shame transactions. They were advertised public events. You know that coworker who takes workplace drama way too seriously? Imagine that energy applied to human trafficking, except it's completely legal and socially acceptable. That was Victorian wife selling bureaucratic insanity disguised as proper procedure. The crowds that gathered tell you everything about how normalized this became. Hundreds of people would show up to watch, placing bets on final prices, cheering for popular wives, jeering at unpopular husbands. Street vendors sold food and drinks. Children played games nearby. This was community entertainment built around human commodification. Here's a documented case from 1835 that perfectly captures the absurdity. Henry Cook put his wife up for sale in Manchester, starting the bidding at 1 shilling. The crowd found her so disagreeable that nobody bid. Not a single person wanted her at any price, so Cook had to take her home, still married, but now publicly humiliated in front of the entire town. The official record states he paid the market fee anyway. 6 pence for the privilege of discovering his wife was unsellable. Let me be very clear here. This isn't some romantic comedy where everyone ends up happy. Real women suffered genuine trauma from this system. They were stripped of every shred of human dignity, reduced to commodity status, and forced to participate in their own dehumanization or face even worse alternatives. The legal framework supporting this madness was surprisingly sophisticated. Courts recognized these sales as valid transfers of marital rights. Magistrates would officiate disputes about sale terms. Official records were kept. Tax authorities sometimes even collected duties on the transactions. The entire legal system treated women like transferable property with detailed regulations and procedures. But wait, it gets worse. Some husbands turned this into a business opportunity. Repeat sellers would acquire wives specifically to resell them at profit. Market records show men who bought wives cheap from desperate husbands, then resold them at higher prices to wealthier buyers. Professional wife traders operated like livestock dealers, maintaining inventories of available women. The geographic spread of this practice is staggering. Every major English market town has documented wife sale records. London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol all had regular wife sale days. Rural markets participated too. Conservative estimates suggest thousands of women were sold annually during peak decades. The sheer scale makes it clear this wasn't fringe behavior. This was mainstream Victorian social policy. You're probably thinking, surely someone opposed this insanity, right? Well, here's what's absolutely incredible. The church largely ignored it. The government actively facilitated it through legal recognition. Social reformers focused on other issues. The only significant opposition came from women's rights advocates who had essentially zero political power. The pricing mechanisms reveal the twisted economic logic driving everything. Young, healthy women with domestic skills commanded premium prices. Older women or those with children sold at discount rates. Women with disabilities or health problems were sometimes sold for token amounts or even given away free. The market treated human beings with the same cold calculation as any other commodity. Here's a case that perfectly demonstrates the system's cruelty. In 1841, James Peterson sold his wife Elizabeth for £3 10 shillings. The buyer, Robert Matthews, discovered after the sale that Elizabeth was pregnant, not with Peterson's child, but with her lover's baby. Matthews demanded a refund, claiming fraud. The local magistrate ruled that Peterson had to return £1 since he'd misrepresented the product's condition. An unborn child was treated as a defect, requiring partial refund. The documentation supporting these sales is extensive and chilling. Handwritten contracts specifying terms and conditions. Witness statements describing the ceremonies. Court records resolving disputes. Newspaper coverage treating it as normal commerce. Government tax records showing duties collected. The paper trail proves this was established, regulated, socially accepted practice. You know that feeling when you discover something so horrible you can't believe it was ever legal? That's exactly what modern historians experience studying wife sale records. The casual brutality documented in official sources is genuinely shocking, even by Victorian standards. The end of wife selling came gradually as divorce laws slowly reformed in the late 1800s. As legal divorce became more accessible and affordable, fewer couples needed this grotesque alternative. The last documented wife sale occurred in 1887, marking the end of over 2 centuries of legalized human trafficking disguised as marital procedure. The final irony is perfect Victorian hypocrisy. As soon as divorce became respectable, society suddenly developed moral outrage about wife selling. The same people who had cheerfully attended these sales for generations now claimed they'd always found them distasteful. Historical revisionism at its finest, collective amnesia about their own participation in institutionalized dehumanization. This actually happened to real women, with real consequences. For over 200 years, the historical records are absolutely clear on this. Victorian England, the supposed pinnacle of moral civilization, had legally sanctioned human trafficking, operating in broad daylight at every market town across the country. The next time someone romanticizes the good old days or claims marriage has lost its traditional meaning, remind them about wife selling. Because apparently, traditional marriage included the legal right to auction your spouse like livestock. The audacity of nostalgia for an era when women were literally bought and sold at cattle markets is just, there are no words. This is just what happens when society treats marriage as property transaction rather than human partnership. And if you think that's insane, wait until you hear about some of the other legal ways Victorians found to dispose of inconvenient family members.